I've just got more detail on the agricultural sector. We'll hear more over the next few days from the Minister of Agriculture. But you can see there, in terms of productivity, just maize, cotton, soybeans, 2016 to 2018, those graphs are picking up quite a bit, especially for soybeans. So we have made a lot of progress, and I think it's fair to say that without a program such as Command Agriculture would not be having the 500,000 tons as part of our strategic reserves, which will probably see us through the potential El Nino challenges, which seem to be looming in the next few months. But the Minister of Agriculture will elaborate. Mr. Speaker, saying, Chairman, there are issues though around the property rights around land. We need to really finalize the issue around 99-year leases so that we can begin to crowd in the private sector, the banks, so that they can extend loans to the farming community, and also we can extend guarantees as well. So this is an urgent matter that needs to be finalized. We are also aware that in this sector there are looming issues around, outstanding issues around the compensation of farmers. That's an issue that the executive is seized with, and there will be a resolution in terms of the amounts that are owed, and the repayment mechanism, or rather the compensation mechanism, will also emerge. Carry on, please. Next slide. In the mining sector, this is a very important sector. In fact, just before this current quarter, the mining sector was growing at about 26%, the fastest growing sector within our GDP focus. So really the issue here is making sure that we continue to support the sector in terms of the forex allocations, support in terms of value addition, making sure that the fiscal regime is able to support and reward value addition within the mining sector. It's a great potential. We have all the minerals in the country. As I say, Zimbabwe is really about sunshine mining, that most of the minerals are available at a very shallow depth into the earth. All you need is a shovel to scoop them out, and that's what sunshine mining does. We have lower costs in terms of the cost of extracting minerals compared to our neighboring countries where they have to dig deep down there, 3 kilometers into the ground. It's very hot down there and so forth. So the other things that we need to do, Mr. Chairman, Deputy President, and Mr. Speaker, and members, is to adopt the extractive industries transparency initiative. This is important. What is happening globally in Africa, that's why I said the benchmark is important. Whenever I used to sit on the other side as Vice President of the African Development Bank, where we're extending loans to countries such as Zimbabwe or on. And what is always consistent when a country has a project coming before to the relevant committee for funding, in whatever form, whether it's a government or private sector, is to ask whether the country is a commodity producer or not in terms of the mining sector. If the answer is yes, then the next question is, are they members of the EITI? Are they committed to transparency within the sector? And that box is also ticked or not. And then that's how the conversation starts. It's a very serious issue, and I'd like to see us make progress in this regard. We can only benefit. Amendments in terms of Mining and Minerals Act, they're still being reviewed. All this will happen, and then formulation of a diamond and platinum policies are underway. A lot is happening in this sector. It's a very important sector. I'm sure that with your support, it can become the shining instance of economic performance that we would like it to be. The next slide, please. Then in terms of the public finances, I did say that we have a twin deficit, a fiscal deficit, which is the state of government finances, and then a current account deficit, which I've already dealt with. So looking at January to September 2018, the cumulative revenues collected amount to 3.8 billion against a target of 3.4 billion. So there's a slight overperformance. So it resulted in positive performance of 442 million, or 13%, 13.2% of projected revenue. So in terms of revenue collection, we are on target. That is not the issue. The issue is on the expenditure front. We're collecting what we said we'll collect. We're meeting our targets, but on the expenditure front, we've not been as disciplined. So that is the budget performance, Deputy President, in terms of our revenue collection. And again, carrying on a month-on-month basis, you can see from January to September that the red line is the target, and that every month we're either on target, as happened in January, February, or certainly above target on all the other months. And you can see the spikes every quarter, which is when most of the companies do their bulk remittances for that quarter. So this has not been a problem for us. We've met our targets. Next slide, please. In terms of revenue contribution, Mr. Chairman, you can see our biggest contributor is VAT. You can see excise duty is 17.8%, income tax is 16.2%, then corporate income tax 14%. But quite clearly, VAT is our largest contributor to our revenues at almost a third. On the expenditure front, the other side of the fiscal position, we can see that between January and September, our overall expenditure was $6.3 billion against the planned expenditure of $4.1 billion. So we overshot our expenditure during this period. So this resulted in an expenditure overrun of $2.2 billion. That's what it is. And it was driven by, some unbudgeted for capital and net lending, and some employment costs that were not foreseen or unbudgeted, and interest on debt. Because this overrun in expenditure was funded through the issuance of treasury bills, averaging 10% interest per annum. That interest alone is a cost, which has also kicked into the $2.2 billion. So you see the ballooning in the issuances of treasury bills. So that's why, but I must say that the picture is beginning to look better. You'll see in the next slide, but that's what we did. So this obviously means that the budget deficit for the period January to September is $2.5 billion against a target of $715.4 million. And so I said it was treasury bill financed, but also through the overdraft of the central bank, which currently is about $2.2 billion or so. But looking at the month-by-month performance in terms of the budget deficit, notice that this is the red, the blue is the target. You can see going to be flat, and then the red is the actual. So you can see the budget deficit ballooning in fact all the time. Basically since March, it's just been running away. But look at September. So when we stopped we call it the printing machine, so to say, close the tap. We almost reached a break-even position in the month of September, and I expect this trend to continue right up the end, where the budget deficit on a month-by-month basis, it will narrow. And some of my more optimistic staff saying that, oh, Minister, we might even get a surplus. I'm not as optimistic. I'm quite comfortable with the mere sharp narrowing of the budget deficit. I sleep well if I know that. So you can see that the deficit in the month of September, the risk of repeating, it was 19 million compared to the target of 99.9 million. So we overperformed, but most importantly is that movement from August to September, that sharp movement, narrowing is fantastic. This is my slide. That's what I use as my pillow to say September was a good month. Next slide, please. On infrastructure funding, needless to say that while Zimbabwe, again, comparing with peers, is decent infrastructure, we need to make sure that we deal with our infrastructure spending, making sure that the government works with the private sector, PPPs and so forth. We have to continue doing this. So in capital expenditure, you can see since 2015, we've had quite a sharp increase, but I must say that it is still not enough. 2 billion annually is not enough, but maybe within the confines of the budget, if that's okay. We don't want to in fact, we have a similar figure going forward for this year, but really to crowd in the private sector a lot more using BOTs, BOTs, all those PPP terms that will make use of it crowding the private sector. Now, in terms of achievements, 2017 achievements, 426 million. The planned was 558 million in terms of budget. So, there's some progress, but we need to do better. So, for example, dam construction, we had a figure there, digitalization, housing, irrigation, and so forth. But my view is like this: it's for infrastructure, it's never enough. We would like to see more expenditure. In fact, really, ideally, you want to see the budget tilted towards a higher percentage for PSIP and less for expenditure. That's a trend we'd like to see, and crowding in the private sector as we do so through public-private partnerships. Look at 2017, Kariba South is done. Reapplication of 1K 7 and 8 is done. But we know that there are still some outstanding projects, such as, for instance, the Bike Bridge, Harare Chirundi Road, which recently we made progress in terms of decision that it should be done, led domestically. That will save foreign currency. As I say that, if anyone comes to you and tells you that, oh, I have a PPP project or a BOT project, but they still want the country to borrow, then it is not that. They're just trying to woodwink you. PPP really should mean that government does not pay anything. Its contribution is a concession. The concessionaire takes care of everything, recoups their money over 25 years. If they request a government guarantee, it's not a PPP, something else. Don't do it. So that's really the lesson regarding the roads. Thank you, Mr. Honorable Minister. On social protection, we continue to support the vulnerable Deputy President, absolutely through various schemes, whether looking at BEAM, whether it's feeding schemes, whether it's food. We continue to do this. But I must say this, going forward, this kind of decentralized program to support the vulnerable will be also supported through the 5% allocation to the provinces. And we've said that going forward, and we'd like your input, of course, that allocation will be driven by poverty levels. We have a poverty map for Zimbabwe. We know the poverty levels. Thank you. But also the levels of quality of service delivery as well, and also the quality of socio-economic infrastructure around health and schooling. That will drive the formula for the allocation of that 5% to supplant what we're already doing in terms of social protection, where we continue to transfer 20 million easily for BEAM, supporting 416,000 learners and orphans. Without. Now, if I can now transition, Chairman, to the issue of re-engagement, which is an important pillar of moving the country forward. We've continued on this path where they told us that the creditors that they are looking at 3 stages. The first stage is for us in Zimbabwe to present a credible economic reform program, which is the Transitional Stabilization Program. We've crafted this, we've presented it, they like it, they've accepted it. That's what I did in Bali at the World Bank IMF meeting last week, and I've continued to workshop it with all the ambassadors represented in Zimbabwe as late as 2 days ago. So that first stage, in my view, is done, and they've all said, please walk the talk. It looks ambitious, so the husband said, how come you want to do everything? It's very ambitious. So I said, no, it is not ambitious. We have 22 government departments. They have work to do. So if each of them have a 100-day performance program rolling, they have work to do. So it's not me who's doing it. I'm merely an orchestrator. I also have my own 100 days, but I'm an orchestrator. That is all I do, but we can do it. But they said, walk the talk. So the second stage is then to continuously engage the AFDB, African Development Bank, and the World Bank, who are classified as what you call preferred creditors. They've got to be paid first and got to be paid simultaneously, which is referred to as a pari passu rule. So we're engaging with them. It is my hope that by this time next year, we'll have paid them off the total of the $1.8 billion that we owe them, in fact, close to $2 billion. The interest rate is escalating. Now that I'm on camera, I can see the interest rate we're paying for one of those IFIs is higher than what we pay commercially. We're paying a 9% interest rate, and it is supposed to be more concessionary, right? It's very, very expensive to be in these areas. So once we've cleared these two institutions, the World Bank and the African Development Bank, Mr. Chairman, will transition then to engage the Paris Club creditor nations, the usual G7 countries and so forth, to see then how we can restructure Zimbabwe as domestic debt, which is large, but in so doing, we do need a sponsor. Often you need a sponsor because we're not quite a hippie country, although hippie option is also on the table. We need a sponsor. The sponsors could be all the G7 countries, maybe one or two other countries could do it. We know of cases such as Myanmar, where the sponsor was Japan, so we're hopeful that one of the creditor nations will come forward and assist us in this way. So that's a three-phased approach to the resolution of our arrears clearance. My next meeting after Bali is going to be on Monday and Tuesday in Livingstone, where the World Bank, what are called IDA deputies will be meeting. They just chose Livingstone as a venue, so they've asked me to join, and again, we continue to one-on-one engagement with the Paris Club creditors, so that because they vote as a bloc, it's by consensus. Next slide, please. So maybe let me leave it at that, Mr. Chairman, in terms of the broader economic issues. Maybe just highlight that we do have this economic reform agenda in the form of the Transitional Stabilization Program over the next 2 years up to year 2020. Its pillars are fiscal consolidation, stimulating production and exports, looking for quick wins, and then governance reforms. But what we'll do is this TSP will run for 2 years, and then 5 years, beyond 5 years, thereafter with 5 years, where we'll have a stabilization, another strategy, and then another 5 years, another strategy to take us to 2030, which is our year for our realized vision of being an upper middle income country. I want to repeat to say really that the TSP has fiscal consolidation issues, and then micro issues around supporting agriculture, mining, and all the other sectors, the environment for doing business, currency reform, the legislative agenda is everything. I urge you to read it, particularly the back of the TSP, which has got very clear programs of action and projects that each of our government departments is seized with, and there are targets in there, and we're being monitored in terms of the results measurement framework, in terms of progress. I'm just going to paraphrase. I think that when it comes to a sector like the industrial sector, Mr. Chairman, there's just need to really accelerate, or rather enhance the capacity to support retooling, but also to support entrepreneurs, but also to make sure that the tax system, the fiscal regime, is better linked to job creation, and I'll be saying that in a moment when it comes to the 2019 budget assumption. The structure, the speaker, Mr. Speaker, said you made a very passionate plea for the establishment of that one-stop shop. I agree with you. I even go further to say, really, we want to be the hub in the gateway for investment into the rest of Africa. It must take its place and make sure that it facilitates us to do so. We still have the indigenization rule on the two minerals, platinum and diamonds. Again, we need to look at how long those provisions will remain, so that we have complete openness in terms of how much a foreign investor could own in any sector where they choose to put their monies. On privatization, we need to be serious about it. The speaker has already said so, that we make an intention, we have MOUs, this and that, and then nothing happens. There's inertia. I've even tried to put a time frame. I don't even know if this is acceptable to anyone, but we need a time frame. We need to walk the talk. We've got a list of the 11 privatizable state-owned enterprises. Let's make an effort to privatize them. I just put a time frame on there. They could be complete by then or towards completion. I think, for instance, in the telecom sector, we can move quickly within the next 12 months. Also, the banking sector, POSB, for instance, we can move quickly within the next 12 months. IBDZ, equally the same. Others will take slightly longer, but let's walk the talk and put a time frame for the privatization. On privatization, I think let's also be creative about how we use the proceeds of privatization. Making sure that, of course, we crowd in a foreign investor or any investor that is credible. Number two, make sure that the diaspora can participate in the privatization opportunity. And a listing on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange would make it easier for them to participate, but also locally, domestically, other people would do the same. But also, maybe a portion of what the government owns should also be reserved for plugging the hole on the liability that we have for the pensions that were lost after the hyperinflation period a decade ago. We still have that hole to close where you lost your pensions, and government has to work hard to plug that hole, but also working with the private sector in doing so. So there's a reason why we need to privatize. These assets are owned by the people. Let's help the people with their own assets to plug certain holes that have been created through our macroeconomic management. The list is long. Those that need to be liquidated, let's move with speed and just do so. I know that there's some things on some of these. I won't say which ones that perhaps they should not, they should be revived. I agree with that. Where they can, I see someone shaking their head vigorous. I'm sorry. In 6 months, I'm hearing they should go. I like that speed. I love speed. So thank you very much. I don't want to say too much about governance reforms. Those continue to be done. And no, let's press on. And my colleagues, the Minister of Justice, is better able than me in pronouncing on those issues. They're now transitioning to the 2019 budget outlook. We want to make sure that the budget really speaks to the aspirations of Vision 2030. It is in line with the Transitional Stabilization Program, stabilizing the economy, laying the base for it to move towards that upper middle income status as an economy. Next slide, please. So this budget will seek, 2019 budget will seek to strengthen our fiscal position, driving revenue growth, at the same time containing expenditure and making sure the deficit moves towards that single-digit target, which we are always aspiring, and I'm encouraged by the September figures. As I said earlier, all this will augur well for growth, for inflation containment, and for reducing the volatility on the exchange rate. We want to make sure that on the debt front we adhere to the national National Debt Act, where there's a ceiling that the debt should not exceed 70% of GDP, and we are constantly breaching that ceiling. If you look at the central bank window, which we've been using for borrowing, we're way over the 20% limit in terms of 20% of previous year's expenditure. We're way above that. It's about what, 800 million versus where we are just over 2 billion. So we're desirous, Mr. Chairman, Deputy President, to move to a budget deficit of 4% of GDP in 2019. We would like to do that. That's the aspiration. Is there another point? Just go back. I want to make sure that. And then on the Public Finance Act, we've just completed presenting the principles for the review of the Public Finance Act. They'll be coming before the House for consideration so that we align it to the Constitution, including this devolution issue of 5%. Is all in there. We are going to align it to the Constitution. Let's move to the next slide. So it's a slew of figures. At your own time, we could look at this, but really at the end of the day, it's about that last role that you should care about, which is the budget deficit from 2018 to 2021 So at the end of this year, I was actually quarreling with my staff when they told me the budget deficit is about 9% this year. I said, well, I think let's brace for like 10, 11%. It's not year end yet. Inflation will kick in, but this is as of the forecast now. It's still quite high at -9%. We have to stay worried about that. And in 2019, as I said, Deputy President, at 4% deficit, and then 2.4, 2020, 2021, 2.2. We want to move below 3% over time with our deficit. That's what really should take home in terms of this very busy slide with a lot of numbers. Next slide, please. But we're acutely aware, Deputy President, that there are risks to our growth forecast, to our revenue forecast, to our expenditure control aspirations. So really these fiscal imbalances continue to be a challenge. There's also some potential vulnerabilities in the financial sector because, again, if your fiscal balance is not good, it threatens the viability of your financial sector. The infrastructure deficiencies continue to impede on the growth profile, and the growth quality is also an issue. It may not be inclusive. When I talk about 6% rate of growth, notice that I haven't said anything about jobs, because growth is only useful if it can be shared and create jobs. Not inclusive. We have to make it more inclusive and strengthen our safety nets, moving towards more what we call productive sector safety nets, as opposed to just mere cash transfer sector safety nets. And then the institutional capacity always needs to be strengthened. And then here, that 5%, I don't want to say too much, honorable MPs, but I was looking at the audit report on which local councils submitted their accounts on time. And it's only one local authority, which is Marondera East. The rest were late or not submitted on time. So there are issues around financial management at that local level, and we have to build capacity in terms of financial management at that local level. We are going to do that. We're going to work with you to do that. In my previous life, I used to do that for a living, build capacity for local authority financial management. We think we have an idea as to how we could be supportive, at least through some of our skills. Foreign currency shortages, export performance, this is also a risk to any of these forecasts, any of the growth numbers that we put out there. I'm taking too long now. On revenue collection, here, I don't want to maybe reread everything. You can read yourselves, but it's just to make sure that we strengthen our revenue collection capacity. Last week, I went to visit the command center that tracks trucks, high-value trucks, through the country, outside our borders. It is quite clear we have a beautiful system, very slick looking, but we still have leakages, because human beings, at the end of the day, still controlled by human beings. If human beings are not honest, they'll make sure that the system is switched off while they conduct their illicit activities and so forth. Yeah. But the technology exists. There's no question about this. What we need is enforcement. So we will be appointing a new ZIMRA board soon. Deputy President, that again would be under strict instructions to do the right thing, deal with corruption, so that we improve our revenue collection, seal the borders. I've said to my staff, please give the police all the tools they need to police our borders. Let them buy those drones. Drones are not expensive. At least if it's flying above you, you think twice about doing whatever you're doing at the border and by bridge and stop forthwith. And that will curb some corruption to some extent. So on expenditure, again, here I don't want to belabor the point. There is one issue, which is an issue that affects the executive naturally, which is the wage bill containment. I think that we need to walk the talk. In the previous budgets, we've said we're going to do something about, making sure that we deal with this issue of freezing non-critical posts, enforcing the retirement policy, and the bonus. Yes, it should not be an entitlement, but it should be within affordable levels. So I don't want to say what will happen to the bonus this year yet, but you can be sure that we are going to do something that, will be a thank you to those who have worked so hard through the year, right through the year, but at the same time, cognizant of the fact that we need to tighten our belts at the same time. Dealing with the payroll, the finance management system, all these things, the list is long. You can read for yourself, say that again? Yeah, foreign service, absolutely. Although I must hasten to say this, I was appalled by the quality of the infrastructure and the services, and the support infrastructure for our embassies in South Africa, in the US, in the UK. These are key missions for Zimbabwe. And I must really beg members, honorable members, we need to support those embassies. The buildings are falling apart. We have got an ambassador, I won't mention his name. He walks the streets of some capital city. He's our ambassador. We don't have an official car to even carry His Excellency around when he's visiting that country, and I won't mention the country. It's a desperate situation. So while we are rationalizing, we need to focus on the key embassies to show, just to give a good image of Zimbabwe for the start, so they can do their work as ambassadors. The list is long, but if something catches this, what did you say about second from last? Oh, allowances. Oh, but the review might mean upwards. So, so review is exactly that, review. so you shouldn't be worried about that. Yeah. I know. Honorable Mliswa, he said, oh, where are our cars? The cars are coming. Just be patient. Did I forget something else? Just go back one more. The by-elections. Oh, so too much money for the government. Well, honorable member is mentioning that we've checked a note, so this is something that we should clearly put on the watch list. I know I'm running out of time. I've extended. I'm just looking for something. Something that will catch state on the. I'm repeating here. I'm just trying to find something new. I'm not. Maybe on quasi-fiscal activities that we are always. Let me explain this, because I've heard people say, "Oh, the central bank is doing too much. Is doing this and that." You know what, colleagues? When we have a tough economic situation like this, the normal remit of institutions tend to expand as they try to cope with the situation. So some of what is classified as quasi-fiscal or soft that you see from the central bank is of necessity. For example, if you see the central bank going out to seek credit lines as a central bank, it's because the private banks cannot do it. Why? They have a low credit standing. No one will give them money. In fact, the opposite has happened. Credit lines are being cancelled. Right? So only a state-owned institution which is using the guarantee of the sovereign can do it. It is the central bank. So I want to make that very clear. So you often hear that, oh, the central bank is crowding out the commercial banks and so forth. The commercial banks sometimes cannot even fulfill that role because of their credit standing. So, but as things normalize, the central bank will retreat. Those quasi-fiscal or crowding out activities of the private sector will become smaller and smaller, and the private sector can then play its full role over time. Right, maybe just one little point about treasury bill maturities. When they, first of all, will subject the issues of treasury bills to an auction system to make sure that we get better pricing of those treasury bills. I'm aware that we've lost a few percentage points in the past because of direct placement. Let's use the market mechanism to get better pricing, the price discovery. But also, as the treasury bills mature, we want to lengthen their duration. So we're working with the pension fund set of the banks to accept longer duration bonds and not just short-term treasury bills, which are quite expensive and with too frequent maturities causing rollover risk. Next slide, please. At the risk of repeating, I've talked about agriculture, manufacturing, services, SMEs. One of the best conversations I had around the budget, around the vision for Zimbabwe, was with SMEs about a month ago. They're very dynamic, and the more we can do to support SMEs, the better. And there's one issue about SMEs, it is access to capital. Access to capital. The collateral requirements are just too onerous for the sector. The cost of capital is too onerous. So clearly dealing with the collateral requirements is key, but also innovating around that sector. Maybe we should start accepting insurance on loans as good enough collateral. It doesn't have to be a stand, a house, or anything. Just insurance from an insurance company as collateral. We should begin to accept that. Other countries are accepting it already. So we have to innovate. And then infrastructure development. I've talked about PPPs. In the next 3 years, we want to finish this by-bridge, Harare-Chirundu Road, Mr. Deputy President. We have to finish that road. And the Minister of Transport is committed to that. We're going to do it. Tax for jobs. I have an idea, but I'll also be quick. I would like to link the fiscal regime to job creation. Other countries have been, this is what they've done. They look at apprenticeships, they look at jobs for the youthful employees, those who have just come out of universities. And then they give tax rebates to companies that create those additional jobs in terms of apprenticeships and jobs for the youth. So we could easily set a number and say, look, we're going to give a tax rebate of $400 for a maximum of 5 jobs that any company creates, but it must be an additional jobs. You don't want to fire others, then replace them. So I prove that they're additional, and this rebate is only after 12 months when the person has spent 12 months with you, as a way to stimulate job creation. Let's reward companies for creating jobs, especially jobs for the youth. So I'm going to push this idea further. On the monetary sector reforms, those will be necessary over time. I'll leave it to the governor to handle that in more detail. I'm looking for something that I haven't mentioned before in this long slide. If you see, the increased contribution to the Constitutional Development Fund, you have asked for $100,000, right, this year, I think. That's what I understand. But we will increase the resources for the CDF, absolutely. I've said something about how to allocate resources around the 5%. Look, the promote governance, rule of law, human rights. Look, this is a continuous agenda. It's a continuous agenda, making sure that we promote good governance, we stick to the rule of law, observe human rights. Look, we are aspiring to be an upper middle income country. Those things come with that kind of status. So we must aspire to be a shining example as far as those are concerned. I want, just say governor will deal with the monetary sector reforms. Let's press on. We're losing time. Thank you. Thank you. I took too long. No, it's okay. Well done.
Order. Can you please give a round of applause to the Honorable Minister of Finance? Honorable Minister, sir, we are very grateful for that in-depth presentation of the 2018 fiscal summary and what you see in your crystal ball are happening in 2019. Thank you. Honorable members, in my salutations, I omitted the President of the Chiefs Council, Chief Fortune Charumbira, and his deputy, Chief Mchane Kumalo. My apologies. I would like to state that you are acknowledged and you're welcome. Now, as you are aware, any country's monetary policy has got to flow from the fiscal statement. This morning, on your behalf, I would like to welcome the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. J.P. Mangujga, who is going to state the monetary policy as it impacts on the fiscal statement as given by the Minister of Finance. Dr. Mangujga, sir. Minutes, I hope you can.
I will try.
I will try.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, General. Honourable Minister, Mr. Speaker, all members of Parliament here present, it's a good morning to you. Good. I was asked to speak about the current market environment and the impact on the budget. I've got a few slides here, please. I just have slides to share with yourself in the context of the monetary policy statements that we are doing in this economy. I've got a number of slides. The first one, please. Can you? Who is it? Yeah, no, the first one. So, yeah, that's my presentation of the current, the scales of what we are going through as the challenges, a recent monetary policy statement that we have done in this country, rationale for the FCA splitting. We are looking at the monetary.
Honorable members, it is only polite and proper that when we invite people to talk to us, we give them that opportunity to do so. I appeal to you to be mature and allow our presenters to do so in silence.
So, then conclusion. The second slide, please. The way we look at the economy in Zimbabwe is that this is what we are going through as the economy. With our challenges, and with the symptoms of it. Sometimes we spend more time on the symptoms or not in the challenges. Our challenges are that of low productivity. We are producing very little food in this country. So when you see the monetary statement, it's because there is no production in Zimbabwe. Over the high imports, we are happy that the imports which are bringing in this country, the productive imports. Low competitiveness, we can't compete with the rest of the world. So we need to compete so as to be able to export. With the huge fiscal deficit, which the minister was talking about here, it needs to be reduced so that at the end of the day, it fits the clothes that is what is called Zimbabwe. With external balances in this country, which are very high. This is the climate, this is the context that we are doing the business. The confidence deficit is very high. And lastly, with negativity, speculation and discipline. Now, there is no economy in the world, honorable members of parliament and senators, which can have a strong currency without a strong base. Wherever you go, all money that you are talking about, I have some people talk about bond notes, forget it. It's just because you have no production, you have nothing to sell. Your currency is as good as your production. Your goods and services that you are producing. What are you producing, Zimbabweans? If you are producing nothing, you can't have a higher currency, which is very strong. So wherever you come from, therefore the challenge that we are facing of foreign currency shortages is because of us not working very hard, these are the challenges. Then the high money supply in this country is very high. Power markets, they come above that is it. Then multiple pricing system, same. High level of informal sector, same. Next slide. That's what we've been seeing. These are the key drivers of the economy. Over the past 2 years, the economy has been improving. We have noticed a rebound in this economy. over the past 2 years. Your deltas of this world, they've expanded. Your triggers of this world, they've expanded. Your derivables of this world, they've expanded. So we have seen a high growth of the economy, but there is no enough foreign currency to satisfy that demand. So end of the day, what do? We end up going out to borrow funds to sustain our economy. The recent monetary policy measures that we have put in place, we did the separations of FCA accounts and RTGSs. What we have done on this matter is very simple. We want to ensure that there is a confidence, there is increased confidence in banking, value preservation, promote efficiency, promote deposits, incentivize those who are producing foreign currency. That's your diaspora remittances and the exporters. Want to strengthen the multiple currency system in this country and want to promote the utilization of foreign currency which is efficient. What have we done? All the Nostro FC accounts are protected under the Deposit Protection Guarantee Facility. This insurance covers those events which are of country risk in nature. They cover the activities or actions of government against those FC accounts. In other words, that's become the insurance. Implications of the current monetary policy statement on the economy is that currently we made it a must that after separating the FCA account Nostro and the RTGS Nostro, the role of the central bank is to ensure that the money in the FCA accounts, RTGS, is given one-to-one by providing the foreign currency Thank you. No problem. You can say whatever you want to say. As follows. All the fuel, all your cooking oil, all your cooking oil, all your cooking oil, all your cooking oil in this country, all your bread that you are eating in this country. Let me give you statistics. We consume in this country 10 million liters of cooking oil on a monthly basis. That 10 million liters of cooking oil that we are consuming in this country, we are only supplying 1 month of soya bean to produce. That's why I said there's no production. So 11 months of the year, we are importing crude soya oil. Bread in this country, we are supplying wheat for 3 months. 9 months we are importing wheat, and therefore we need more money to ensure that we import that which is basic commodity for this country. Yes, that's why the honorable ministers are here, so that we can push for production. Therefore, this is what we are doing. We need to ensure that the settlement remains the US dollar, and we are going to continue doing that. And there is no process. The economy is self-correcting itself.
Order. Honorable members. Honorable members, I am appealing to you. I am appealing to you to give the governor an opportunity to make his presentation. Okay.